Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 25 of our daily live streams about the coronavirus and its effect on the business community. I'm Brigitte Lambanda from Cape Town in South Africa, and my wonderful co host is Viola Manuel. Viola, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much, Brigitte. How are things going on your side?
It's going okay, except that my internet connection is not playing ball today, and in order to live stream, you need a great internet connection. So we'll see how far we go. I want to say welcome to everyone on LinkedIn, on Periscope, on YouTube, on Facebook. Welcome to the show. If we disappear, it's because my internet connection has decided it does not want to work today. One of those things, the one thing we've learned since the onset of the coronavirus and its effects on all of us having to work from home, that the internet is absolutely overloaded at the moment. And so all services seem to be impacted in some shape or the other. So if we suddenly disappear from screen, you know that it's not because we don't want to talk to you. We do want to talk to you, but it's because the internet has failed us. So yes, other than that, I'm okay. And other than me still having this toothache that I'm battling with because I can't have my tooth seen to because the dentist said it's one of those procedures they're not allowed to do while we're under lockdown. So, one of those unintended consequences that I personally am having to live with. How's your day been, Viola?
It's been good, and thanks for the update on your tooth. I was going to ask how things are progressing on your side. It's the worst thing. I could not be smiling through toothache. So, kudos to you. Well done. I think it's day 25. It's crazy. It's going so quickly. Like I said yesterday, it seems that phase two is going so much more quickly than phase one went. That was such bad grammar. But I know that one of the things we are going to have to talk about very soon is what happens when we get to about day 30, when they start talking about what the next phase looks like. So I think it might be interesting for us just to sort of start predicting what we think phase three is going to look like, because I know our premier, for example, Premier Windy, is talking about a partial lockdown and talking about allowing certain sectors to actually go back to work. And that's it's going to be quite interesting to see which sectors are decided, how are they going to actually roll out a partial lockdown. I know one of the things they have said is that those who are at high risk will remain under a complete lockdown. So if you're elderly or you have health problems or you are what they call you're highly at risk of contracting the virus, you are going to remain under complete lockdown until they have this whole thing sorted. So it's going to be quite interesting to see, where we go to from there. And so what will this partial lockdown look like? No one's really sure. I think that they are still busy making decisions about what it will look like. I strongly suspect that certain industries, where you've got like one or two people in an office that's got enough space and you can manage and control sort of hand washing and sanitizing and cleaning, I think those businesses might be allowed to go back. I'm thinking specifically, of those sort of ICT businesses where you've got one or two people working, or a company that does specialized work, where you just have one or two people in a big space. They might be allowed to go back to work. I know that there are going to be strict I want to say protocols and strict rules that will have to be adhered to before you can open your doors. You would probably have to prove to the Department of Health that one of your main sort of priorities is to make sure that everybody's safe. So I think that's really what the partial lockdown is going to look like.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. I don't think it's going to be um, it's not going to be business as usual when you go back. That is for sure. And I
Yeah.
think one thing we could possibly not reiterate enough is that nothing's going back to normal as we know it, because there's nothing normal about the situation. And moving forward, I think, it's going to be a huge mind shift, but nothing is ever going back to the way it was prior to
Yeah,
COVID-19. And so even if we go back into this partial lockdown, it's not a return to business as usual as
yeah,
we knew it.
yeah.
Um,
So
it's
yes,
there's going to be significant changes, and especially the health aspect. I think in view of the fact that we've had so many retailers, we've had hospitals and retailers had to shut their doors because they've had instances where staff came down with COVID-19. And so you want to take every precaution possible not to have your business then close down, because if one member starts getting it, chances are it's going
correct.
to spread very quickly.
Correct. So it's going to be up to businesses to actually prove or put some kind of processes in place, and I think be very clear in terms of what those processes are to avoid the spread of the disease. And of course, I think it's a given that as soon as one of your staff members are test positive for the disease, for COVID-19, you are going to be shut down. So I think businesses are going to take it very seriously in terms of how their employees are screened. I know that in certain instances, especially the food sector, where people are still going to go, into these big factories and so on, all of them are, sort of checked, even if it's just a very superficial check on their temperature, asked one or two questions about how they're feeling. Every single employee before they get onto the factory floor, this is the process that they have to go through. I know that there are other organizations that are incredibly strict, that if they call you in to come to work, you have to complete a questionnaire, you have to declare whether or not you've seen anybody, whether you've been in touch with anybody, whether anybody's come to your home, whether you've gone to anyone's home during lockdown. Extremely strict measures are going to be put in place. And I think it's going to be good for business owners to start thinking about what those strict measures will look like for their businesses, so that if it is an application process where you have to apply for your business to be reopened, or a situation where you have to have that process on file somewhere, it's going to be good for business owners. And I think just the complete executive just sit down and start thinking about what protocols will be put in place. How are we going to do it? I think the role of a corporate nurse is going to become a lot more, that's going to become a more prominent role. I think a lot of organizations are going to have sort of a nursing staff on site, especially for bigger organizations. I think you are also going to have to prioritize in terms of your workforce, who comes in at what times, and are you going to do shifts where sort of one phase gets completed so that you can still practice that 2 meters social distancing, and then bring in the next shift, those kinds of things. Are you going to be hiring or leasing new premises with more space for your staff? So there's a lot to be considered, Brigitte. I think phase 3, in terms of this partial lockdown, businesses are going to have a lot to think about. And I think it would be a good idea for business owners to actually get ahead of it by starting to actually, and I think it's what you and I have been calling for all the time. It's to start strategizing post lockdown. I think now we have more ideas of what the strategy needs to be around.
Viola, I want to just mention one thing that you've touched on, and that's the protocols. It is going to be of utmost importance, because you cannot simply rush into opening your doors, even if your business type gets to go ahead. It would be one of the biggest mistakes you could possibly make. You're going to have to strategize about how you open, as you said, and then have those protocols in place, and also have protocols for what happens if one or more or 10 of your employees suddenly test positive. Then what? You unless you have that in place, you're planning to fail.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you
Absolutely.
can't just plan to be in business. You need to plan to know how to be operational under business unusual conditions.
Correct. And how to keep your staff safe and how to keep your staff responsible for their own health and for the health of everybody else that they're going to be working with. We spoke about hospitals and retailers. Huge risk there because that's where people are gathering. So if your factory or your business is not going to be a place where people are gathering, there is a huge risk of contamination. So it's going to be I actually don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know if every hour a bell rings and everybody's taking out sanitizers and just wiping down surfaces and washing hands if it's a situation like that, if it's everybody wearing cloth masks. Is it going to be a situation where you're going to sit with those, if you have have lots of visitors? Are you going to have a situation where you're going to have to put up a glass partition between your frontline staff and your visitors? There is so much to consider, and there's going to be so much I think there's going to be an incredible amount of pressure on business owners to be able to prove that they will be able to keep their staff safe, and that the safety of their staff is going to be paramount. So it's really going to be interesting to see how it works.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors at play because you've got staff having different modes of transportation. To what extent is that going to put the rest of the staff at risk? And as we're having this conversation, I'm also thinking about people living with pre-existing conditions. Generally, you don't disclose your pre-existing conditions to your employer. That's personal information. To
Yeah.
what extent is that now going to become an important factor in deciding whether or not you should be allowed back um, into the office? Because a pre-existing condition would not only predispose you, but then put others at risk because your risk is greater.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
you know,
that's going to be such a great question for our guests tomorrow. If you remember, Lisa and Tarina coming back to the show tomorrow, and they are one of the HR specialist and a labor relations specialist. That's going to be an interesting question to ask, because now what is it that you are going to have to declare to your employer? You have to declare if you're not feeling well. You have to declare, if you are starting to show the symptoms of the disease. So it's going to be very interesting to see what our new normal is going to look like. How is that going to affect your contractual agreement between employers and employees? Transport, for example, I know that there's a lot of people now trying to find private transport for their staff. I think that's going to become another major industry, because I think a lot of people are going to say, don't get onto buses and trains. We'll rather work out a situation where you get picked up at home in a sanitized vehicle and you come to work, and you get picked up again by that sanitized vehicle and you get taken back to your homes. So private transport and transport companies are going to have, I think there's going to be a huge opportunity for them to market themselves effectively as a safer means of getting your employees to work. And I think that's going to be part of your protocols. And so part of what you're going to declare to the Department of Health, to say, of my 50 people, I've managed to get private transport for them coming in and coming out, so they're in a safer space. It's going to be very interesting to see what the partial lockdown is, the unintended consequences of it, and where there are going to be businesses that are going to be able to take full advantage of these unintended consequences. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. I did want to raise one other thing, and that is just how absolutely disgusting the behavior of some people are. It's just been reported today that some people have been found looting the food parcels that are intended for the poor. And to me, that is just like just like the kind of behavior that you actually can't excuse that kind of behavior. There are people that are saying they have literally, they've eaten their last food on Friday. They have no resources. And as much as people are giving, I know that people have opened their hearts and are putting, sort of food parcels together. People are putting hygiene parcels together. And to find out that those parcels are actually being looted by people who have and are in more privileged positions is just absolutely disgusting. I mean, I'm embarrassed by that kind of behavior. But it's I think, par for the course. It's part of what we must start to expect under these unusual circumstances.
Wow, that is absolutely inexcusable in anyone's book. The other thing that has disgusted me to a large level is the fact that schools have been looted. The ICT departments have been broken into, equipment stolen. It is it is absolutely disgusting. And usually these are schools that cater to people in the lower economic sectors where they can ill afford to rebuild and restock those items.
Yes.
We are in dire situation, and the fact that people could go and steal from the educational rights of our children is
Yeah.
beyond words.
Yeah, and I think the next thing to be targeted is going to be places of worship. Mosques are empty, churches are empty, church buildings are empty, temples are empty. There are no worshippers going there, so they are becoming perfect spots for criminal activity. And it's just sad because there's actually no excuse for that kind of behavior. It's this the stigma of that kind of thing is just unbelievable. It's just not okay.
We're seeing a lot of changes happening as time passes, and the lockdown continues for an extended period. For example, in the beginning, when lockdown started happening, the scam world, for example, went absolutely dead quiet.
Yeah,
And what we're discovering now is that these scam artists are pivoting faster than our businesses can. So they are
absolutely.
totally cashing in on COVID-19 and finding innovative ways to scam people using COVID-19. It is absolutely
Yeah,
shocking. We talked about yesterday about security in companies, and how they're now having to ramp that up significantly
yeah.
to combat the cybercrime.
Yeah, and I think also one of the industries that are going to have to be considered in terms of the partial lockdown, in terms of businesses opening, are businesses that offer that kind of technical support in terms of security software. I mean, the sale of security software, the installation of security software. Um, it's been crazy. One of the things I don't think anybody's considered is the fact that, at lockdown, my printer was, already indicating that I needed to get, new cartridges. And of course, that was the last thing that I thought about. And now, so many days into lockdown, and of course, Shay having all these projects and things that he needs to have printed, I'm running out of printer ink, and I'm going like, now, where do I go to next? So I'm desperately hoping, and I think a lot of people are hoping that the businesses that support you in terms of your tech, that those guys can be opened as well in terms of phase 3, just so that you can have that support. I mean, a lot of your admin staff are now sitting at home, and do require, if your laptop crashes or anything like that happens, you need to have that kind of support, because you can't run over to the neighbor's house. You're not allowed to do that. So it's going to be very interesting to see which businesses are granted permission to open and what the criteria will be for them to open. I know that one of the sectors that I think is probably going to continue to carry this brunt of the lockdown is probably the tourism sector, because of course all their guests are not going to, are being encouraged to not travel. So that's a sector I think that's really going to bear the brunt of this. And I think Cape Town Tourism, and all the other sort of NGOs that support that sector are going to seriously be affected by lockdown much longer than other industries are. So yeah, it's going to be it's we wait with bated breath to hear. I think in the next 3 or 4 days we'll probably hear what the partial lockdown will look like and what the rules and guidelines will be.
Absolutely. And one of the other questions I want to ask our guest tomorrow. So if you've got any HR related questions, put them in the chat, because we're going to have these specialists with us tomorrow. So if you have any questions in that regard, let us know in the chat below. One of the other questions I also want to ask them tomorrow is what happens in the case of staff members who are desperate for income and they decide not to disclose underlying conditions or the fact that they suspect that they might be COVID positive, but they're desperate for the money.
Yeah.
That's the kind of scenario one can also see happening.
Yeah, and what about the scenario of people moonlighting now? You're supposed to be at home working for company X, but you have skills, and now there's the opportunity for you to get additional income by doing the same thing you're doing for another company, and you're sort of working from home. So the idea of you actually being caught out doing all of that might it might actually, if you weigh out the opportunity to get more income, will people still declare that I'm taking up work with somebody else as well, at the risk of losing their full-time jobs? So I think there's going to be a very interesting discussion tomorrow.
Absolutely. What if we got on for Wednesday so that people know to join us on Wednesday as well? So tomorrow's HR day. What if we got on Wednesday?
Also, tomorrow's HR day, and just a reminder that we go live at 3 tomorrow's Tuesday. We are trying to set up and confirm with our disaster management representative, and that's on Wednesday. And then our labor relations representative, the labor union representative on Thursday. We've got 3 full days, and then on Friday, you and I will just sort of catch up on everything that's been happening for the week.
We'll do a recap.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the end of our show, and as usual, we want to remind you that the CuppaChino Club does not support fake news with regards to the coronavirus at all. And we also want to warn you against sharing misinformation or disinformation, and that in fact in South Africa it is a punishable offense. So please pause before you hit the share button. We know it's very tempting. Very often we get things from people we trust, but that doesn't negate the fact that we still need to go back and do some checking to make sure, because generally it's somebody that receives it from somebody else that they trust, and somewhere along the line nobody actually does, hits the pause button to do a fact check. So please do check before you share anything, and let's not contribute to the misinformation around the coronavirus, because there's already enough stress. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye from Cape Town in South Africa. My name's Brigitte Limbanden. We'll see you back tomorrow.
Thanks so much, Brigitte, and bye to all our guests. Have a wonderful evening or morning, depending on which part of the world you're in. And we will chat to each other soon. Take care. Bye-bye.